Corn was a living, breathing wall of green that stretched all the way to the sky. For a city boy like me, Leo, who'd grown up surrounded by concrete and the constant hum of traffic, the sheer scale of my Uncle Henry's Nebraska farm was both awe-inspiring and quietly terrifying. I was spending the summer there, a desperate bid by my parents to straighten me out after a rough junior year. My only company was my cousin Jake, who was 2 years older, and had made it abundantly clear he considered me a nuisance. "Don't wander into the corn, Leo," he'd said on my first day, a mocking grin on his face. "Especially not at night. Old man Haggerty's fields have a way of keeping people." I'd rolled my eyes, assuming it was a standard scare tactic for the city kid. But as the weeks wore on, the joke began to feel less like a joke. The farmhands, usually loud and boisterous during their lunch breaks, would grow quiet whenever the subject of the North Field, Haggerty's fallow land that bordered ours, came up. I'd catch them looking towards the sea of 7-foot stalks with a wary respect, like sailors glancing at a stormy sea. The rule was simple, repeated by Uncle Henry with a grim finality that brooked no argument. Be back at the house before dark. No exceptions. The corn is no place to be after sunset. The reason given was practical. It was easy to get disoriented, to lose your way in the labyrinth of identical rows. But the look in his eyes suggested something else, something darker. The trouble started on a sweltering, airless Thursday in late July. Jake and I had been tasked with fixing a broken irrigation line in the south field. We'd been bickering all afternoon, and a final sharp comment from him about my uselessness made me snap. "You know what, Jake? I'd rather get lost in the corn than listen to you for another second." His smirk was infuriating. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes, city boy." That did it. Fueled by a hot rush of anger and pride, I turned my back on him and stomped right into the edge of the north field, the one that belonged to the mythical old man Haggerty. The stalk swallowed me whole instantly. The world outside vanished, replaced by a narrow, shaded corridor of green. The air was thicker here, heavy with the smell of damp earth and growing things. The only sound was the rustle of my own passage and the buzzing of unseen insects. I walked for maybe 10 minutes, my anger slowly cooling into a prickling unease. The corn was too uniform, too silent in a way that felt unnatural. I decided I'd proven my point and turned to go back. But the path I'd taken was gone. Every direction looked identical. The sun, which had been my compass, was now hidden by the dense canopy of leaves above. A cold knot of panic tightened in my stomach. "Jake," I called out, my voice swallowed by the corn. "This isn't funny." Silence. I started walking, trying to pick a straight line. Left, then right, then what felt like straight again. The shadows between the stalks deepened, turning from green to a murky grey. Dusk was falling, and with it, a profound chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. That's when I heard the first sound that wasn't me. It was a soft, rhythmic shuffling, a few rows over to my left. It matched my pace. When I stopped, it stopped. "Hello?" My voice was a trembling whisper now. "Jake, if that's you, I'm sorry, okay?" The only answer was the shuffling starting up again, keeping perfect time with my now hastening footsteps. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I broke into a run, crashing through the dry stalks, the leaves whipping at my face and arms like sharp fingers. I could hear the shuffling, keeping pace effortlessly, a relentless, unhurried companion in the growing dark. Tears of pure, undiluted fear streamed down my face. I was lost, truly and completely lost. Uncle Henry's warning echoed in my mind, now sounding less like a caution and more like a prophecy. Suddenly,
the farmhouse that night was a fortress under silent siege. Uncle Henry didn't just lock the doors, He dragged heavy furniture in front of them, the old oak sideboard against the front door, a pair of worn armchairs against the back. He checked and rechecked every window latch, his movements stiff with a practiced dread that was far more frightening than my own fresh panic. He didn't speak much, but his actions screamed a history with this terror, a long, weary familiarity that made my blood run cold. Jake, for once, was silent. All his earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by a pale, watchful anxiety. He helped his father without a word, his eyes constantly darting towards the black squares of the windows. "What is it, Uncle Henry?" I finally managed to ask, my voice still shaky. What was that in the corn?" He paused, his hand resting on a window frame. He looked old in the dim kitchen light, older than his years. "The land has its own keepers, Leo," he said, his voice low. "Old man Haggerty, he dabbled in things, old things, worshipped the soil, the growth, the harvest. But you can't make a deal with the land without giving something back. He gave it a protector, a guardian for his fields." "A scarecrow," Jake whispered, his voice cracking. "It's not a scarecrow," Henry said sharply. "It's a vessel, a thing Haggerty put together from dead things and dark soil and gave it a purpose, to keep strangers out and to keep what's in the field in." He looked directly at me. "And you, boy, you went and stirred it up. You trespassed. It knows your scent now." A profound, sickening understanding settled over me. The shuffling wasn't an animal. The whisper wasn't the wind. I had been personally marked by something ancient and malevolent. We spent the night in the living room, none of us daring to go upstairs to our beds. Uncle Henry sat in his armchair with his shotgun across his lap, staring into the darkness of the fireplace. Jake and I huddled on the sofa, jumping at every creak of the old house, every moan of the wind outside. It was around 3 a.m. when the sounds began. It started as a faint, dry rustling, like a bundle of stalks being dragged across the porch. Then came the tapping, a light, almost polite tapping on the front door. It wasn't the frantic beating of an animal. It was deliberate, intelligent. We all froze. Uncle Henry's knuckles were white on the shotgun. The tapping stopped. For a long moment, there was only the sound of our own held breaths. Then the sound moved. It was on the side of the house now, a slow, dragging shuffle, followed by that same gentle tapping on the window pane. It was circling us. Shuffle, drag, tap, tap, tap. It knew we were in here. It was letting us know it was out there. Jake had his hands clamped over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. I felt a cold sweat break out all over my body. The thing was patient. It took its time, making a full circuit of the farmhouse, tapping on every window it passed, a monstrous door-to-door salesman in the dead of night. Finally, the sounds faded around the back of the house and didn't return. The rest of the night passed in a terror-stricken silence. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in weak grey hues, it felt like a reprieve we didn't deserve. Uncle Henry was the first to move, his joints cracking as he stood. He walked to the front window and peered out, his body tense. "Henry!" a woman's voice called from the kitchen. It was Aunt Clara, back from visiting her sister a town over. "Why is the furniture all against the doors?" We all hurried into the kitchen. Aunt Clara stood there, holding a bag of groceries, her cheerful expression fading as she took in our pale, exhausted faces and the barricaded door. Clara listened as Uncle Henry haltingly explained what had happened. To my surprise, she didn't look shocked. A deep sadness settled on her face instead. "It's been quiet for near on 10 years, she moaned. The discovery of the teddy bear shattered the fragile peace we had clung to. It was no longer a distant threat in a neighboring field. It was here, on our property, violating the sanctity of our home. The air itself felt charged, thick with a malevolent awareness. The dogs refused to leave the porch. their low growls a constant unsettling rumble. Even the wind seemed to carry a new sound, a faint, dry rustling that whispered through our own corn, a sound that hadn't been there before. 2 more nights passed, each one a fresh exercise in terror. The shuffling and tapping returned, but it was bolder now. It wasn't just circling the house, it was testing the doors, leaning against them until the wood groaned. On the second night, I woke from a fitful sleep to see a dark, distorted silhouette blotting out the moonlight on my bedroom window. A tall, impossibly thin shape with a lolling head. I stifled a scream, pulling the covers over my head, and when I dared to look again minutes later, it was gone. But the feeling of being watched remained, a cold pressure in the room. The next morning, Uncle Henry made the decision. "We can't live like this," he said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "We're not just scaring it away with salt and whispers. It's rooted in. We have to pull it out by its roots." Aunt Clara looked at him, her face pale. "Henry, no, you can't go back in there. That's what it wants." "It's what I want, Clara," he said, his jaw set. "It's on our land now. It's threatening my family. This ends today." He walked to his heavy oak gun cabinet, but he bypassed the shotguns. Instead, he pulled out an old single-bit axe, its head stained with age but its edge gleaming sharp. Then he went to the pantry and emerged with a glass mason jar filled with a clear liquid that smelled strongly of gasoline. A rag was stuffed into the neck, a Molotov cocktail. My blood ran cold. This was no longer about defense. This was a declaration of war. "Jake, Leo," he said, his eyes burning with a grim fire. "You're with me." Jake looked like he was going to be sick, but he gave a tight, jerky nod. I was frozen. The memory of that whispering cornfield seared into my mind. "Henry, this is madness," Aunt Clara pleaded, gripping his arm. "It's the only language things like this understand, Clara," he said gently but firmly. He pried her hand away. "Stay inside. Lock the door behind us." The walk to the edge of the north field was a death march. The healthy green of our corn seemed to wither at the border, giving way to Haggerty's patchy, rust-colored stalks. The air grew still and heavy, the buzzing of insects falling away into an unnatural silence. It was waiting for us. Uncle Henry paused at the very edge, holding the axe in one hand and the homemade firebomb in the other. "We find the clearing, we destroy the marker, we burn it, then we get out. Fast. You don't stop for anything. You understand?" Jake and I nodded, our throats too tight to speak. He took a deep breath and stepped into the corn. The moment we crossed the threshold, the world changed. The sun vanished, blocked out by the dense, sickly canopy. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. The silence was broken only by the crunch of our footsteps and the frantic beating of our hearts. The corn seemed to press in on us, the rows twisting and turning against us, trying to confuse us, to lead us astray. But Uncle Henry moved with a grim, unerring purpose, as if he could sense the heart of the field. Then the shuffling began. Not from one direction, but from all around us. A dry, scraping sound moving through the rows, keeping pace, mirroring our every step. "It's hurting us," Jake whispered, his voice trembling. "Let it," Uncle Henry growled. "It's taking us right where we want to go." And he was right. After what felt like an eternity, we broke through into the same small circular clearing. The stunted scarecrow was still there, the animal skull seeming to grin at our